Um, Yesterday, the GSIs and I went over the list of people enrolled in the class, people on the wait list, people who had come to section, people, trying to identify people who had who were holding a spot in the class but not attending section, and we only found 2. So I dropped them yesterday afternoon. Apparently, there were like 5 more people yesterday who didn't make it to section, and I will drop them this afternoon. That's only 7 people. As of yesterday morning, there were 29 people on the wait list. I haven't checked it today. In other words, the wait list is still probably 20 people. I don't know exactly when the final drop deadline is for students. My experience is people do continue to drop. Places will continue to open up. I have frozen enrollment, which is to say no one else is going to be able to sign up for this class anymore. I'm not going to let people add it now because we obviously have more than enough people. If you're still on the wait list, all I can say is I don't know what will happen. It depends how many people drop, obviously. We will monitor the situation and keep you posted. If you want to talk about the circumstances, then you should talk to your GSIs, maybe send me an email, and we'll see how this plays out. I can also go check this afternoon and see if the wait list has shrunk any more than I shrunk it on purpose. So any questions, other housekeeping matters? It's kind of a mystery to me why there appear to be 25 empty chairs in the hall today if there's 20 extra people beyond what we're supposed to be able to hold in here who are trying to get in the class. But so be it. Okay. Today we're going to talk about the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, ecosystem services, and the issue of markets. I think I've got no? Okay. The reading for today was basically just a summary for decision makers of the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. I actually did figure out how to jettison the rest of it and just have that in a PDF. I had to do that to send it off for the reader. So I hope everyone was able to get just the pages they needed, right? Can anybody give us a little background about the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, what it is, how it was performed or produced? Why are we reading this thing? What does it matter? Anybody know anything about this? No? Nothing at all. It was modeled in many ways on the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. The process that produced the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment was set up on the model of the IPCC, which is to say it was intended to be extraordinarily comprehensive and extraordinarily rigorous in its assessment on a scientific basis. In other words, this was thousands of scientists working together over many, many, many hundreds of hours, assembling all of the known information on the subject of human impacts on the environment at a global scale. So I can't remember the exact number. I think it was about 2,000 scientists who contributed in one way or another to this assessment. And the idea was that, as with the IPCC, which involved all of the world's leading climate scientists working in a consensus fashion to arrive at the most scientifically solid assessment of climate change that could possibly be produced. In this case, the objective was to bring together all of the world's best scientists on these subjects and give them the time, the opportunity, sort of force them to reach consensus on what do we know about human impacts on ecosystems worldwide. And the hope was that this would not only be extremely credible, scientifically speaking, but that it would get a lot of attention and sort of grab the attention of policymakers and the general public worldwide. Interestingly, when it came out, it was front-page news all over Europe that this thing had come out, this report had come out. It was not front-page news in this country, with the exception of maybe a handful of places. So it's not your fault if you haven't heard of it. But when you think of this, you should think of this as not just somebody's casual opinion about human impacts on ecosystems. Yeah. The question is, does this have anything to do with Millennium Villages? I don't know. I don't know what Millennium Villages are. Oh, does it have to do with Millennium Development Goals? Actually, not really. No. The Millennium Development Goals were a UN-sponsored effort to define sort of benchmarks for development for the next, 50 or 100 years. No. I don't believe this was. The UN, I'm sure, had some kind of role here, but I don't think this was actually spearheaded by the UN. You might check for me if you'd like. Wikipedia says so. God! With support from. Right, but the team that did this is not a UN team, or it's not a UN institution the way the IPCC is. You'll have to excuse me, I have a cold, and I'm going to have to cough every once in a while. I will try to turn the mic. Okay, so let's, in a sense, what we're doing here is we're stepping back and saying, as of roughly 2000, what is the state of the world's ecosystems? And this, I would suggest, is as good a place as any, probably a better place than we're going to find in any other single place to answer that question. And so, in a sense, this is just like, okay, where are we at? Let's think about it. Now, what you found reading this, I'm sure, is that all of the whole sort of issue of human impacts on the environment, which, of course, there are infinite different number of ways you could think about trying to measure human impacts on the environment, right? There are countless interactions between humans and the environment. How are you going to sort of bring them all into one metric or some set of metrics that's manageable in order to produce some kind of global evaluation, right? That's a difficult, challenging question in and of itself. How do you bring all the different kinds of impacts together into one framework? And the framework they use is ecosystem services. They say everyone in the world depends completely on Earth's ecosystems and the services they provide. Over the past 50 years, humans have changed these ecosystems more rapidly and extensively than in any comparable period of time in human history. So we're looking at that same, roughly since 1950 time frame that we earlier noticed, remember, was a point of inflection in the rate of human population growth globally, right? And also a point of inflection in terms of economic production globally. And here they're saying, this period of time has witnessed greater human impact on the environment, more extensive, more rapid than any other time ever in the history of humans. This transformation has contributed to substantial net gains in human well-being and economic development. In other words, this has meant prosperity or increased prosperity for a great number of people. But not all regions and groups of people have benefited from this process. In fact, many have been harmed. Moreover, the full costs associated with these gains are only now becoming apparent. So this is page 1, summary for decision makers of the report. This is the sort of overarching statement that this assessment is going to make, or is making, about the state of the world's ecosystems and humanity's relationship to them. Ecosystem services are necessary for humans. They make some people well off. They don't make everybody well off. And the impacts to those ecosystems are not fully accounted for or not fully appreciated within the sort of general framework of thinking about economic production. What are these ecosystem services? What does it mean to say that everybody in the world depends completely on them? There are a whole bunch of different ways you can classify, describe ecosystem services. And basically, we're just talking about anything an ecosystem provides or does that benefits people, which is to say any natural process or product from which we derive some kind of benefit. Can you think of anything that wouldn't, in some way or another, fit this? Can you think of any natural process that doesn't? I mean, well, let's go through this list. So there's food, obviously, right? Crops grow. The fact that soil and the nutrients in soil and water and sunlight can come together and cause crops to grow means that all those different pieces are providing or contributing to an ecosystem service. Fish. Everything that contributes to causing the existence of fish in the ocean or rivers or lakes is essentially an ecosystem service. Livestock, wildlife, water quality and quantity, right? So the fact that the vegetation on the hills over here helps capture water, both in reservoirs and in groundwater, and that water, because it's passed through certain natural or partially manipulated processes, is clean enough to drink. I mean, the snowpack in the Sierra Nevada is providing an ecosystem service for San Francisco by existing there and replenishing each winter and slowly melting each summer and feeding into Hetch Hetchy, and that water then ends up in the taps of San Francisco. You might say the Sierra Nevada itself is providing the fact that it rose up and became tall enough to capture all that moisture coming off the Pacific and turn it into snow and hold it there is an ecosystem service for all the people who drink that water. Disease management, pollution sinks in medicines. The biodiversity of plants and other organisms in the world from which we might derive medicines, either now or in the future, are providing a service. Any system that absorbs waste is providing a service. That service can be thought of in terms of reducing diseases. It can also be thought of in other ways. Climate regulation. Anything that causes the temperature to be, or that contributes to the temperature being what it is, or at least being what we have come to become accustomed to it being, because the plants we have, the orchards and crops we have planted in a given place grow there under a certain temperature regime, right? If that temperature regime were suddenly to change, and those crops were suddenly no longer to grow, we would have lost something of benefit to us. So, in a sense, you can say anything that affects temperature is an ecosystem service. Storms. Anything that, contributes to the pattern of precipitation. Atmospheric chemistry. Winds and currents, all of these things contribute to making the ecosystems of the world perform or produce or function the way they do. And to that extent, all these things can be seen as ecosystem services. Finally, you also have to add in things like spiritual fulfillment and aesthetic enjoyment. Exactly why, I'm not sure. But it seems that somehow at the end, maybe it's because there are environmental philosophers who got involved in this process and they want to remind us that there are aesthetic values, non-monetary values, cultural values that don't necessarily have any utilitarian function for humans, but are nonetheless important values that people derive from nature. So all of these things can be encompassed within this paradigm or framework of thinking about the environment in terms of ecosystem services. Do you have any questions? Yes?
Do earthquakes provide any kind of service, benefit services?
Interesting question. Do earthquakes provide an ecosystem service? Any thoughts? Anybody have any thoughts? Yeah. Well, the same processes that produce the Sierra Nevada also produce earthquakes. So if we want to have the Sierra Nevada, we have to take the earthquakes with, so to speak, as if we had any choice. But I'm not sure that would go to the level of suggesting that the earthquakes themselves are providing a service. Any other thoughts? Yeah? Okay. Maybe we should think about earthquakes in the context of the larger framework of plate tectonics. And plate tectonics, in fact, do provide ecosystem services. Do you know what they are? Excuse me? Recycling materials. Yes, in a sense they do. The plate tectonics are responsible for the presence of certain kinds of fundamental minerals and so forth. Carbon, in fact. Plate tectonics is a significant source of, the sort of origin source of a lot of carbon in the Earth system. So yes, there are ways in which we might think of even plate tectonics. Earthquakes, I don't know. Good question. I mean, what do they provide? Fodder for the news industry. Any other thoughts?
No, I was just going to add, I was going to say, they have that range. Some respects, the tectonic plates move like what ways?
Yeah, I suppose that's true. I mean, as that's a good point. I mean, as the plates move, they contribute to the larger environmental context in which evolution occurs and can help produce unique environments that are unlike other places. Point Reyes might be an interesting example of that, right? I mean, it's a piece of Earth that is now where it is in a rather different temperature climate regime than where it originated, and it's unlike what it's sitting next to, and that has effects on the plants and animals, especially the plants that can live there. Yeah?
Is argument saying that every single thing in nature gives us a service, or just that nature's full of services almost everywhere?
That's a really good question. What is this argument actually saying? Is it saying that everything in nature is a service? Everything in nature could somehow conceivably be a service? Is it that humans they're clearly saying that humans somehow fundamentally depend on ecosystem services, like all the way down, like everything and I mean, in that sense, it's true. I mean, the processes that cause there to be oxygen, sufficient oxygen, and not too much oxygen in the atmosphere, such that we can breathe, we wouldn't be able to live without it, right? Right. So we're completely dependent on it, right? So in that sense, it does appear to be a framework in which literally anything at least can become or can be related to an ecosystem service. And yet it also remains fundamentally anthropocentric, right? At the end of the day, even if we include aesthetic and spiritual fulfillment, it's still basically saying ecosystems are valuable through the lens of human needs and desires. We're not going to try to talk about the value of ecosystems in and of themselves or for themselves in some kind of innate sense. That's a pretty key philosophical decision to take. And they have taken it here, I think, for quite pragmatic reasons, right? They are trying to sway policymakers. And I think they calculated that they were a whole lot more likely to sway policymakers if they just said, no, we're doing this entirely in terms of the needs and desires of humans. And we're not talking about some esoteric inherent value that floats around in the ether of certain environmentalist sets, right? This is not somehow just nature for nature's sake. This is hard tax, let's talk human needs. Yeah.
Just curious, it seems to me after reading that there are definitely making a humans being part of the ecosystem, not
Okay.
Not they're part of the ecosystem. I want to back to the spiritual aesthetic enjoyment, because with that thought in mind after reading it, the spiritual and aesthetic enjoyment gives mental health well-being. The humans are part of the ecosystem.
Okay.
So that's just
Okay, so the points being made down here, and I think they're good ones. One is they are also trying to insist that humans are, in fact, part of the environment, within the environment, not somehow abstracted or isolated from the environment. I mean, they're really trying to emphasize the links, the dependencies of humans on the environment, as well as the impacts of humans on the environment. And secondly, your point being that spiritual or aesthetic fulfillment values derived from nature are themselves can have beneficial effects for humans in terms of mental well-being or health. Yes, to that extent, they have utility as well as some kind of more idealist value. Yeah.
my tendency to think of utility is less the mental well-being of people and more the, and I think it's mentioned a few times in the text, the ability to use ecotourism as a revenue generation. So there is value,
Right.
monetary value of two things.
Okay, tourism, tourism, which by the way is the world's largest industry. Not ecotourism, but tourism as a whole is the world's largest industry. And a growing amount of it is ecotourism, tourism in which nature is sort of the point, right? So there are big economic implications that can be linked to what we might gloss as aesthetic or spiritual fulfillment. And there's some interesting questions there about who has the money to pay for that kind of tourism and what kinds of things do they value and to what extent do those things that they value actually reflect things that are good for ecosystems, right? I am of the opinion, based on research I've done, that a lot of the ways in which Americans came to value the desert as beautiful, the southwestern desert as beautiful, actually had to do with light effects that were related to massive wind erosion. Basically, you get prettier sunsets when there's lots of dust in the air. And about the same time that we were hammering it with overgrazing during a severe drought, this guy took a long walk through the desert and described the sunsets and all the things that were so beautiful about the desert, and people came to latch on to this. Like, it doesn't follow just because someone's sitting there saying, oh, that's so beautiful. It doesn't mean that what they're appreciating is actually a healthy ecosystem, right? They may, in fact, be either misrecognizing what they're seeing, or they may be appreciating something that is, in fact, not healthy from an ecological point of view, but they still think it's pretty, for whatever reason. Anyway. All right, so you get a sense of the kinds of things that are at stake in thinking about ecosystems this way. Let's run through some of the data, right? They collected all this data, and they present for us a variety of measurements, indexes, metrics of human impacts on the environment, and it's not pretty. It's really scary, in fact. So, break the world up into biomes. We've got tundra and boreal forests at the bottom, working through temperate coniferous forests, tropical and subtropical moist broadleaf forests. That would be the rainforest of the world. Montane grasslands, shrublands, deserts, tropical, subtropical coniferous forests, and so on, up to Mediterranean forest, woodland, and scrub. The orange is percentage of that biome that had been lost by 1950. The lighter red is lost between 1950 and 1990. The darkest red is projected loss by 2050. So what percent of each type of biome, terrestrial biome, has been lost as of 1950, as of 1990, and as of 2050? And you can see that for most of them, we are looking at, if not already then by 2050, loss of in the ballpark of 70%, 60 to 70%. Wherever you see larger red, you're talking about larger impacts that are either ongoing or soon to come. We see cultivated systems cover about 25% of the entire terrestrial surface of the Earth. About a little more than a quarter of that is cropland, which means we're talking about land that is being actively plowed, which has dramatic effects on water, soil, erosion, various kinds of nutrient cycles. Approximately 20% of the world's coral reefs were lost in the late 20th century. Another 20% were degraded. Approximately 35% of mangrove areas were lost. Water impounded by dams quadrupled since 1960. Reactive nitrogen in the Earth system has doubled, and phosphorus has tripled. What's that related to? Fertilizer. Okay, the application of chemical fertilizers, synthetic fertilizers to agricultural systems. Literally, the amount of active reactive nitrogen in the entire Earth system has been doubled. Yeah. Doubled from background natural levels since the advent of synthetic fertilizer production, which is roughly 1910, 1912, 1914, something like that. So you can see, I mean, the only place in which there's any projected gain in a biome is temperate forest, steppe, and woodland, where the dark red runs off in the negative direction, right? Which has to do with afforestation. There are parts of the world where forests that have previously been cut down are growing back, and the net change over time at present is a gain. And New England, actually, or the northeastern United States, is one such place. Places in the world where we are gaining forest cover. But for the most part, every other kind of terrestrial biome is in the process of being converted to human uses in one shape or another, one shape or form, and therefore being lost. Yes? Okay, the point being made is that the afforestation in New England or in the northeastern United States may look from this as an instance of responsible environmental management. Whether that's, well, a number of points are encompassed in this remark. One is that that then gets held up as somehow evidence that the United States is environmentally responsible, which is questionable to begin with, especially since this afforestation is not something that anyone is actually consciously set about to do. And another is that the source of wood for the people living in that area is somewhere else in the world. So it's not like these people are somehow not using lumber and contributing to deforestation.